So let's get to the very start of the whole discussion. When people decide to get married, they would usually go for premarital counseling. And we know that if the foundation isn't quite right, that building doesn't have a lot of chances of survival. So I'll start off with you, Mr. Ogu. What are the things that can be better, should be done at that stage of the relationship to ensure that we have a solid foundation when it comes to mindful communication?
Thank you, everyone. I think prior to going for any counseling session, I think communication would already have started, and the couple or the intending couple would already have begun engaging, as it were. And it's really important because, like I tell people, it's at that point you can start seeing, flashpoints of what communication would be in marriage. Yeah. So it's really important that at that point they get to understand things like their personalities, how they perceive information when it's shared, how they interpret information. They understand the background that each one of them is coming from, because your background also helps you to process information. Because again, when you talk about communication, it's about giving and receiving information. Now, the twist to that is there are a lot of factors that come between the giving and receiving that help you to, process that information as it comes and as it goes. So, like I said, personality or your background, things that, individuals have been exposed to, their family values, once you are able to distill all of this through the counseling session, I think then it sets the tone for proper communication and goes beyond all of the mushy experiences at the time.
I love you love me. Oh, okay, thank you very much, sir. Mr. Adeniji, he said two words, he said them in passing, but I want us to dig deeper because they are big issues. And I remember that we had a bit of a conversation around that. So I'd like you to talk to us on how your background can impact communication in your relationship. And I don't mind you giving us examples. I know that you have kids and grandchildren, so tell us all the stories and how you merged together as one.
Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. Like Mr. Ogu said, the way we interpret what another person says is often a factor of our own experience. There are what we call filters in the mind of every human being. Those filters are born out of life experiences, born out of our relationship with our parents, family members, in the place of work and all that. So when, for example, my wife says something to me or I say something to her, the way I would understand it will be based on my upbringing, my life experiences, and of course my relationship with her, vice versa. Now, oftentimes, what we do not factor in is the fact that somebody, for example, who was coming from a totally different background from that of his spouse would look at issues differently, would communicate differently. For example, if a man comes from a family where women are seen but not heard, not that they are not there, but they are not expected to speak when men speak. And such a man gets married to a woman whose background is that everybody has a voice, everybody has a right to speak, then there will be problems. Therefore, when we get married, the first thing we need to do, everybody, and it took me a while to understand what I'm just sharing now, everybody needs to understand that it's a partnership, and because we come from divergent backgrounds, viewpoints of understanding will be different. I'll give a practical example. If, for example, in the house you grew up, when the food is to be served, maybe it's dished, the man has the first right of getting whatever. You get married to a woman in whose home everybody just digs in. In fact, it's a competition who gets what first. And that happens immediately after marriage. The man will be in cultural shock. Now, like my colleague said, forget the dating period. When you are married, certain things are expected. So, if you are not able to understand the perspective of your wife or of your husband, there will be communication breakdown. Now, don't forget that when we talk about communication, we're not just talking about people talking. It involves listening. It involves paying active attention, because there are some non-verbal communication modes. Somebody may just come to you and say, it's okay. It's okay, the way it is said would actually mean it is not okay. So when you communicate, there are certain gestures, there are certain things that are said or not said that you have to pay attention to. Now, all these will depend on the kind of background that you have. So the background determines how you understand what is said, how you react to what is said, and how you use the information passed effectively or otherwise.
Thank you, sir. I'll come back to that. But before I do, I'd like to hear from Mrs. Akinpelu. He spoke about personalities and how that can impact the way that people communicate. Now, if you find out how God has done it, it's the outgoing brother that usually likes the Jeje sister. Or the other way around. I think it's like that in every dynamic. There are very few times that you see two extroverts that connect and become a couple, or two introverts that connect and become a couple. And when the cards are eventually on the table, it becomes, you talk, I talk, and you're wondering, but we loved each other till we got to this point. So I'd like you to speak to us on how our personalities can impact both negatively and, of course, positively, and how we can ensure that we get the best of ourselves because of our personalities.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for the question. So like Brokal and Sadewale said, your personalities are who you are. It's me, right? And it comes from what? How do you form your personality? It's from your experiences. It's from the things you've heard, the things you've listened. And it only comes natural that you react based on what it is you're used to. And then you're speaking to someone else who has a different orientation, different exposure. I have formed, because your personality is things you've done over time, right? That have become you, your values and all of that. So it's only natural that you possibly would differ a bit from myself. So how do we get to communicate? Basically, it's just us trying to understand where each person is coming from. But what happens is we're talking to each other and expecting that you should know what I'm talking about. Because I feel this is the way I've always spoken, so I just assume you should know. Forgetting that this person is coming from somewhere else. You have lived whatever number of years of your life. Two of you are just getting to live together. You're coming from different exposures and everything. So you need to be patient to listen and understand. People feel communication is I'm talking. As long as I'm talking, I'm communicating. But if you're not understanding, you've not communicated. So a lot of the times we speak from our own understanding, forgetting that the person's interpretation differs. And the only way you have communicated is when that person has understood what you are trying to say. Like he said, you would say, for example, when they say Ojulorowa, right? It comes from when you see. Some people are coming from that orientation. If I don't see you, I can't talk, I can't express myself very well, right? And some other people are just, I communicate by 1, 2, 3 things, and I expect you to understand. So we need to take time as couples, especially from your dating stage to when you get married. You need to, first of all, try to understand where the person, put yourself in that person's shoes, or try to understand that person's own position. I'm melancholic, for example. My husband is phlegmatic, right? Or I'm more melancholic. I'm a deep feeling person. I'm very emotional. So if you are talking to someone who's emotional, what that means is what? I'm going to be interpreting every single word you say to me. And I'm looking at what you are not telling me more than what you are telling me. And your words will strike a chord very easily because I process it deeply. Someone else who's phlegmatic or someone who's choleric or the sanguines, they talk and they move on, right? So imagine communication between two of us. It takes deliberate patience and understanding to realize that, hey, I can't just dump things on a melancholic person because that person will, in fact, I'm literally gone before you think. So you need to be sensitive. And with time, you get used to each other. That's why they say couples have their language. They understand themselves. Sometimes now you talk and you get yourself easily. And that came because over time, we've understood each other's communication style. But if you are not patient to understand each other, you will get frustrated. When we also got married at the initial time, my husband, like I said, is phlegmatic, right? So very introverted. And then in the night,
I'll come back from work. He says how many things?
He's barely talk. And we come back from work, and he just is quiet, and he's just muttering or something to himself. And I'm like, we've not seen ourselves all day. Talk to me. And for him, he feels frustrated because at the night time is when he actually relaxes and gets himself, right? And he's able to do certain thinking and all of that. It was so frustrating. I would cry because I'm like, how do you expect us to build a relationship if we're not talking? But for him, he's getting his strength is from keeping quiet and just, it took a while, but I said, okay, we need to.
Yes.
But it's true. We had to reach a compromise. I said, okay, we need to reach a compromise. It's not working for me because I just felt marriage, you know, all the fantasies you had when you were going to get into marriage, that you come back, we'll sit, we'll gist, we'll talk about
gist. And then we'll watch TV and then we'll probably fall asleep there.
I will go to bed together.
At the same time.
The rude shock was that he wanted his space at that particular point in time. But the compromise we reached was he realized that he needed to give me some time. So when we get back from work, we eat together, we'll talk, we'll go over at least a bit of the day. Even if he doesn't do much of the talking, I do a lot more talking. And don't forget, there's culture. There's also our differences as man and woman. Women we relax by talking. The men relax.
I think someone is going to tweet that.
What's the truth? Am I saying anything different? Can you relate? Yes. The guys keep quiet. When they're dealing with stuff. You frustrate them when you're trying to get them to talk. But the lady wants to let it, because when she talks, it eases the stress and the tension. But the men are,
it's therapeutic.
Thank you. So we can't understand, but that comes from us now understanding each other and saying, hey, wait a minute. I expect you to listen. I expect you to talk. And you to understand that I won't be fine if I don't let it out. Because if you don't let me talk, I will feel so frustrated. And next thing, we can't have a rapport. So it comes from what? Understanding, right? You move a bit, I move a bit. So he made his own adjustment by giving me time between when I come back and we finish eating. But going to bed, till today, we don't go to bed together. But I've made my peace with it because I see the compromise he has made in making time out for me. And then I understand that he needs that time too. So that's how we just make adjustments for each other.
Thank you so much for sharing, ma'am. I've learned a thing that I would definitely implement because I'm in that space as well. When I say 10 things and it's like, I'm like, oh, the talk I've been talking since. The answer is,
Only one.
I'm like, babe, say something. So what do you want me to say? So, helping us understand that aside our personality differences, our gender differences as well can cause that difference in how we communicate and understand one another. Thanks again, ma'am. Okay, Mr. Ogu, something was said earlier on about communication style. I'd like you to please touch on that and show us how we can work with one another. Because at the end of the day, what we're looking for is harmony. You understand me, I understand you, and we have a peaceful and a blossoming atmosphere in our homes.
Thank you. So I think the foundation, again, we should lay is that the objective of communication is that we should have, in terms of feedback, we should be on the same page. So there is no use communicating and then you request feedback and then you see that the person doesn't really understand what you are saying or what you have said. So it is really, really important that whatever or however you choose to communicate, feedback is critical. And, Reverend used to say this, when you are communicating with God and you are praying, and you hear nothing from God, will you say you've communicated with God? Really, there's no feedback. So it's just one party talking and engaging. And that is where each person has a unique way of receiving information. And there's no one size fits it all. And it is not a journey that, when I got married, this is how me and my wife talks. As you evolve in life, as you face different experiences, relocation or whatever it is, as the environments change, as children come into the mix, all of these dynamics keep changing. And you find out that, we used to do this before, but now we don't do so much of this. But then again, the objective is still the same. We need to achieve all of that. So it's really important that you understand, first of all, the person you are dealing with, and then you know how to tweak information or when you communicate with a person so that you get the best of the person. I don't know if you understand. So there are some people, I'm a fleg, really. I'm married to a sanguine choleric. And from experience, I know that if she's not in a good place, we can communicate, but it will not be effective because the outcomes that I expect will not happen. And let me give an example. So if you say food was prepared and you think it was a bit too salty, you can't now say, babe, this food is salty. Do you understand? You really can't. No, some people say, that's who I am. I'm very objective. I tell you the truth. I say it the way it is.
Dun, dun, dun.
But wisdom will teach you. And that's why I said, the mix, So even if you tell your spouse, you feel you are telling her the truth, I can bet you that the objective of that interaction will not be met. Because you've told her the truth, you've won the argument, but you've lost the person. So most likely, when that meal is cooked again, either you get something like, Mr. Tester mo, or, I don't know, that kind of. So there's no harmony, there's no joy in that conversation while the meal, But if you understand your spouse so well, and even if it was a bit salty, you don't say anything about it. And then maybe when in a happy place, you're watching a movie, and then there's a food scene, and then somebody's saying something, you're like, wow. Just like that thing we ate, your daddy. Did you notice that something was... And I said, yes. But I was just tired. That kind of... So you talk about it in a happy place, and then the person says, so this was... Okay, so I'll make an adjustment. Now, the objective of the communication has been met, and you would see that when she's now going to do that a second time, learning has taken place. But if you just say it without taking into cognizance the peculiarity of the person you are having that interaction with, you may win the argument, but you lose the person. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Yes, please.
So in addition to what he said, we should also always realize there is what to say, when to say it, and how you say it. Always check yourself with that whenever you're saying something. Is this the right time? Is this the right place? How am I saying it? You know, like when they say you need to shape your mouth, shaping your mouth there means arrange the way you say it, because it comes out differently to the person who hears. So where you also say it, because something I will say to, you're not my husband, but something I will say to my husband, you know, when we're home, it's different from the way I possibly should say it when we're outside, right? Because it depends on the setting. And so the way he's going to receive it will be different. And that's why you'll be wondering, why is he angry now? What's wrong with what I said? So you must learn that intelligence of knowing how to say things, when you say it and where. Because it helps, is it proof? Because people who you are talking to, you don't know where the person is coming from or the person's, or the culture or the background. That's why you say certain things and the person takes offense. Because you have not been intelligent enough to interrogate this thing I'm saying. How would this person receive it because of the way it's coming out from my mouth or the way I have said it? You know, you can tell someone to go to hell, excuse me, right? And the person will be happy going there, right? Because of the way you say it. But that's the truth. And then somebody else who is intelligent will say, they just told you you're stupid. And you're happy. And somebody else will say, go to hell. And you are like, is it me you're talking to? The difference, and they both said the same thing. It was just the way you say it. So you just need to check that.
Thank you so much for sharing that, ma'am. Mr. Adeniji, you had touched earlier on nonverbal cues. And I know that we're in an African society here, although we have a global audience. And I know in this part of the world, there's a lot of nonverbal cues. You know how back in the day, your mom would say, put it on my head now, and she would look at you like, try it. You know, and we take that same attitude into marriage. So how do we manage that aspect of our culture that encourages lots of nonverbal cues where what is said versus what is unsaid? How do we manage that properly?
All right. There is what we call the Vida view, some ways by which you can communicate effectively, even saying those things that might not appear palatable, which ought to help regardless of culture. Now, if you're going to, let's use the example that my brother, Mr. Ogu, gave of maybe too much salt in the stew or the soup. One of the things that the Vida view expects you to do is to be able to put forward your viewpoint, even in that happy space, by starting off with something complimentary. Nobody runs away from a compliment. Using that illustration, it could be that, oh, lovely meal, I enjoyed the food. But could it be my taste? It appears a bit salty. For me, you have moved it away from a complaint to your own observation. Usually, when you lead with a compliment, that resonates. And if the manner, and I did not learn this very early in my marriage. It took me a lot of tears, sorrow, and sweat for me to get to understand it. Because then I was doing what my brother said initially. I was just offering a honest opinion.
Honest child of God, sir.
Yes, and it put me in a lot of trouble. And that is the honest truth. Incidentally, my wife is in the auditorium tonight, so she can attest to what I am saying. So you lead with a compliment. Number two is, of the Vida strategy, is to also offer options. When you go into a conversation, regardless of your cultural background, thinking that you alone has the view that should be respected, then you are setting yourself up for problems. Now, one thing that we have learned to do in our marriage is, if it's my wife who has the idea, she'll come to me and say, love, why don't we, do you think we can do this thing like this or like this? Immediately there is an option on the table. So if I look at it and I say, okay, of these two, maybe we try this. Or I could also say, but again, we could also look at it from this point of view. Now, even if we do not end up doing what she said or what I said, around the options, a discussion can be had. So if you come from a cultural background where they say to you, everything that a man says is what the wife must do, and you go with that mindset into marriage, you are going to be easily frustrated. Because a time will come when the woman will push back. And when pushback happens, you become defensive. And from a place of defense, a lot of mistakes are made. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. I'm going to go to you, Mr. Ogwo. A question has come. Remember, please, that if you're here in the audience, you can ask your questions. If you're also watching us online, please put your questions in the comment box, and we'll take as many as time permits. This woman says, how can a woman handle a situation when her husband is not interested in dropping the beliefs that are not helping the marriage? My way or the highway?
So I'll share our own story. I don't know if this works, but then I'll share it. So when we got married, I think within the first 5 years of our marriage, we noticed that it was just like, it was, it wasn't clicking, it wasn't working in terms of, the back and forth and all of that. And the reason why I think she would say her husband says it's my way or the highway is because there's an issue of trust, where you think probably you have allowed your spouse take a decision, and maybe sometimes it didn't pan out, and then somebody's trying to accuse the other person of not being able to take decisions, or we listened to what you said and this is what happens, and then it's now like a blame game, and then somebody's stepping back and then another person is enforcing and trying to push. But again, what we found out was that we're pulling ourselves apart, and I just woke up one morning, or I think we woke up one morning and realized that if we continue like this, in the next couple of years, we'll just be friendly married people that don't know themselves. So we deliberately decided to be in each other's space. And what do I mean by that? So if probably she's reading a book, she'll say, I'm reading this book, can you join me? I think you should read it. Or she's attending a training, do you mind taking me there? I would like you to, if she feels it's something that's interesting, or I'll pay for you, I'd like you to join. And then whatever your spouse is doing, be kind of interested in it, whether it's football, whether it's his business, whether his office, a bit of what is going on. What then happens is that communication begins to become less cumbersome. And what do I mean by this? There are some relationships where they only communicate about money and putting out fires. That is what they communicate about. They don't know about each other's likes or dislikes, their hobbies, fun time, every other thing in between. So communication is not interesting. But when you are into each other's world, what happens is that you begin to process things also like the other person will process, because you have the access to the information that makes the person think the way they think. And once that begins to happen, that's when people say, oh, you and your husband, you think alike, you talk alike. Oh, I asked mommy, the same thing mommy said. It is because you are constantly in the same space and processing things in the same way. And gradually, it becomes very easy for your spouse to defer to you because they think or they know that even if they were not around, you would most likely take the same decisions they would have taken even in their absence. Right? So it is not going to be intimidating for the man to say, because obviously he just knows that whether it's a money decision, he knows that you would not use money to buy a Shwebi when we're supposed to do this, because he knows that to an extent you also think in a financial way like he also processes things. And as you do that over time, it becomes really very easy, and really it doesn't really matter who is steering the ship. At whatever comes, whoever has access to take those decisions can take those decisions, and whoever is running with them feels comfortable because they know the place from where you are taking those decisions, except it's a situation where the person is just probably a control freak. But I think even over that, if the person sees the sincerity of purpose and sees that, there is the outcomes of the decisions that are taken, I think over time it just works out. Yeah. Our personal experiences, yeah.
You'd like to add something, ma'am?
Okay. So I'll ask the lady to check. Is it the way she's saying it to him, perhaps? Maybe the way she talks that is making him not even want to listen? So she can check that. Could it also be, like he said, maybe trust issues? Maybe he doesn't trust her. Maybe she's saying it, he feels she's saying it from a selfish point of view or something, right? So she can also find out how that works. Because, like we said, communication is until the person has understood. Meaning, if the person hasn't understood or accepted what you're saying, you've not communicated, and the person hasn't understood what you are trying to say. Can I also say, they say everyone has their mumu button, right? There's something that you can find a way to get across to someone. So it's finding out how is the best way to have certain conversations with that person. Do you understand? So, for example, my husband, because he's a phlegmatic person, I feel he's so slow, right? So I'm trying to have the conversation and he's not listening. So at some point in time, he shuts down, right? And what he wants to do, we don't have a conversation because he's not, I feel you're taking time, so I make the decisions and I move on. And over time, he doesn't listen to me, right? So he has taken time for me to realize that, hey, I'm losing it here because I'm not able to get that partnership from him because he just feels like you're not listening to me. And you think you can do it yourself. And then go ahead. So he just takes backstage and just allows me to go. And by the time I finish expending my energy and all of that, I come back to him and say, okay, but... So it has taken time now to me better understand his communication style, to understand that, okay, it takes him a long time, right, to process it. It's not that he's not listening to me, but he's pondering over it, which possibly is taking him a long time. But it also takes him to also realize that he can't also dwell too long on certain things. So he too needs to realize that there are things that he should be able to just let go. Because if you continue to wait for how long it takes you, we will not move. And that's why it becomes frustrating to the other person, and that's why she feels. So it's her being sensitive to understand his communication style, because of worst case, there may be somebody he listens to when it comes to certain subject matters. You can also try that approach of going through that person, because there are some people that you find that it's until somebody else says it to your spouse, right? That's when the person listens, and you're wondering, okay, but I've been telling you the same thing, and you are not listening to me. So you learn the wisdom of either putting the information in a different way in the person's face, or, have a colleague or somebody else say it and the person would better listen. So we use different manner to communicate. But the bottom line, what do you want to do? Is help the person understand what you're trying to say. And with time, it gets better.
Thank you very
much.
If I may,
if you don't mind.
Quickly, sir.
Right.
Really, really quickly, because we have quite a number of questions.
It goes to the topic of our discussion, mindfulness. You see, there is a place of paying attention Perhaps what the woman in this scenario should do is when she talks to her husband or when her husband says certain things to her, she listens and she repeats. What do I mean by that? You just said to me, my dear, that this is what you want. Doing that has the potential of clearing up any conflict. If the way you have represented it is not what he meant or she meant, they are able quickly to now correct or confirm. What that does is it limits or narrows the potential for conflict. For all you know, just like Mrs. Akinpelu said, it might be the manner in which it is presented. For all you know, it might be the understanding of the man of what he thinks his wife wants that is different entirely from what the woman wants. So listening and repeating helps. Okay, my dear, are you saying, is this what you meant? That clears up a lot of I just thought to chip that.
Thank you so much. So ensuring that feedback happens would bring clarity to the conversation. Now we have a question here around conflict, which of course is the flip side of communication. Someone says they've been having challenges in their marriage, but their spouse has outrightly refused any form of counseling. I'd like you to speak to that, Mr. Adeniji.
Right. Now, there is a principle of counseling that you cannot help anybody beyond the level to which they want to be helped. Particularly in church, we have discovered that when it comes to issues between a couple, most of the time, the person who has brought the issue for resolution will talk to the counselor in a way from his or her perspective. If I am the one that says to my wife, I think we need counseling, and I take the matter to the unit, the counseling unit, or to family life, I will have represented the issue from my point of view. So what we do is, no matter how rosy or otherwise your story is, the next session must be with the other partner. But that again is a roadblock, because we've had instances where the partner has said, lie, you took me to court, to church. No.
It's almost like court too.
Yes, I'm not going with you. Now, when that happens and the person comes back to us and say, look, my spouse is unwilling, we try to find a way of engaging, either to call or, if somebody we know in church, to approach and follow. But once we hit a brick wall, what we do by default is to resort to prayers. We've had one or two situations where we had prayed for the counseling to take place, and it took place. But where you have a recalcitrant spouse or partner, you cannot effectively solve that problem. So what we always do is, if you want us to counsel you and your spouse, you need to start work from the home. You do not tell your spouse that you are too stubborn, you are unreliable, you don't provide for me, I am taking you to church. It will not solve the problem. It will not solve the problem. It is important that the two of you come to a consensus addendum that there is an issue that we need to talk about. And the problem in church, even though we all know that everybody in church seeks the favor of God, wants to blossom, etc., the problem with counseling in church is that nobody wants to appear weak. People assume that if you go for counseling, then there must be a problem. Of course, we are all in church because there is a problem. And that is the irony of it. So people look at counseling as something to... I tell you what, if you tell people that the counseling unit or the family life unit operates from entrance 7, if they are walking out of this door beside the choir, they will walk so fast past the counseling unit, even for people who have need of counseling. So it's a matter of perception. So if you want your spouse to cooperate with you in the place of counseling, discuss it. It shouldn't be that you are dragging somebody. Let them go and beat sense into you. It will never work.
Thank you so much, sir. Mr. Ogu, some people, this is one of the questions, we entered into marriage without counseling, no premarital counseling. What do we do from there?
So I think one of the things that it's quite unfortunate because the church has made provisions for people to walk that path before they get married. But then if this happens to be a situation where people find themselves, it now, beckons on both parties to really want to solve the problem. Yeah? Because when people think that there are options, then, they're not really interested in solving the problem. But when you know that, okay, now we've hit a roadblock, we've been, just gliding through, now really we desire to seek help. And then they are committed to walk the talk because it's now like reverse integration where you now need to start from, you're now going back to the things you were supposed to start from, having those conversations that you were, and for most people it becomes like an eye-opener. And they are wondering, why did we never talk about this? How did we glide through this? How did we, make these mistakes? Sometimes when people, come for counseling, premarital counseling, and, I jokingly tell them that your first test is planning your wedding. Because then you need to communicate, you need to solve problems, you need to deal with externals, in-laws, you need to agree, you need to, money issues, every other thing that you walk through in the marriage. This is like a scenario that you need. So nobody should cut the experience short for you, because if you don't go through it, there is a tendency that when you get in, all of these things will start replaying. So I think I think it's just that commitment for people to say, we're in this and we're going to walk through it and we're going to seek help, and make this work. And, I think there are people who have been able to look back and see and make their marriages better. Because they've been able to engage, will I say things that they had, overlooked initially. One of the things people don't understand is that the degree to which you can love someone is the same degree to which you can hate the person. And how do I mean by that? So, if I have a friend who doesn't stay in Lagos, for example, and he comes into town and he doesn't tell me he's in town and he goes back, I will really feel, we are so close, you came in and you didn't tell me. It is because of the love that I have for him. That is why I feel so pained that he came and he didn't see me. Whereas if there was someone who really I didn't care about, if he came and did the same thing, it wouldn't, So it's how do I explain it again? But really, I think it's
something that must be done.
Exactly.
So I think one thing that we can take advantage of, and we really should be thankful that we have a community in Daystar that caters to our needs all around, is that we have the counseling
can
unit.
Hold your hands.
Exactly. So whether it's pre or post, you can always go to the counseling unit and of course the family life unit to walk through those issues.
Exactly.
And experientially, I can tell you will get help because I've been there. We have to run along.
Sorry,
now.
let me just also say that please, you can also come for counseling. You don't have to have a problem to also come to the family life unit for counseling if you didn't do premarital counseling. Don't wait till you have an issue to start running. You can come for the classes, sign up for it, and we'll take you through the class because you don't want to get into problems. You can avoid it still. So it's never too late, was what I wanted to say.
Thank you. Thank you for chipping that in, ma'am. Okay, so quickly, this question is for you, Barrister Adenichi. Someone has said, if a mistake happens between myself and a colleague that leads to sexual sin, do I have to tell my husband at home? You, Bazia. It's one of us that asked.
Okay. Now, this issue, except we want to deceive ourselves, happens. But the reason why a lot of people are afraid to even broach the subject is because, sadly, we are judgmental as a body. Now, if, for example, not just in our church, in any church that I know, anyone is caught in sexual sin, everybody automatically transposes that person to be the manifestation of the devil. The way the person, if the person is a minister, that person automatically will be benched. If the person serves in a unit, that person will be benched. In such a way that the church leaves its generals wounded on the battlefield. Now, until we are able to transcend that mindset, a lot of things that can easily be repaired will be left unrepaired. And I speak from the position of experience. I have seen it several times. Because of confidentiality, we cannot begin to mention in specific instances. But we have seen situations where people, not as a result of their own weakness, had fallen into sexual sin and have been restored. But it is not advisable for you to broach that subject with your spouse if you can anticipate the outcome. I'll give an example. If the husband is somebody that is known to be violent, it is unwise because of conscience, because you want to repair your relationship with God, to now, without more, wake him up in the middle of the night and tell him, you might not like the experience. So what ought to be done, and very honest and frank about this, what ought to be done is to seek counsel in church. There will be people that you trust. There will be people that would not be overtly judgmental. There will be people who will have a way of addressing that issue. Now, the danger in not doing anything is that every time you seriously want to pray, there will be the enemy of our soul that will keep interdicting you, falsely telling you that your prayers will not be answered, whilst our Father in heaven would readily forgive and forget if you take the matter to him. So the first step is not to call your spouse. The first step is to repair your relationship, your vertical relationship with the Almighty God. Now, if you put that out of the way, then, because it takes restoration, it takes forgiveness, it takes a lot of trust building to repair that trust once it is broken. So you want to seek counsel. Go to the family life ministry, come to the counseling ministry, and the Lord will help you. Thank you so much.
Amen. Thank you so much, sir. We're gradually rounding up our conversation, but just to let you know that if for some reason we haven't been able to take your questions, you can send them via email to familylife@daystarng.org. We have a question for you, Mrs. Akinpelu. Someone says, I'm 5 years older than my fiancé. His mother says we can't get married, and he said we should go ahead. What do you advise? In 1 minute, if possible, please.
I cannot also be the one to say this is what you should do, because marriage is the two of you, and that's what's important. And in Daystar, parental consent is very important, because we are not outside the environment and what the recommendation is. So there must be people who possibly can speak to the parents of the man to help them see why they can encourage the marriage. So explore who in the family can have that conversation. There may be possibly somebody who has had a similar experience and it worked out, and they can have that conversation. If I could use mine as an example, for the fact that mine was, I was Igbo and my husband was Yoruba, right? That was already, my parents were like, no, you can't, from where? And I was the first person to get married. It took prayers too as well. So that's another thing that person can consider doing. It took praying about it. It took them also spending time to get to know him better, and it became easier for them to accept it. They also knew that, okay, obviously I'm quite spiritual, so I possibly have prayed. So there must be somebody around them who can actually speak to that person to have that conversation. But get as much help as you can, and don't forcefully make that decision, because you want to also check your heart and be sure that this is the right move. If there is a hesitation from them, which could also be the age, is the age for now, you want to be sure that, okay, is there any truth in what it is that they're saying? And you yourself, are you comfortable? And then you can now make a decision. But you can't forcefully make that decision and go ahead and marry, because it would come eventually to haunt you. Because if he's the kind of person that listens so much to his mom, it's just a matter of time. You may find that mom will find a way to influence him, and then you now become the person that they're against. So there are a lot of factors that you need to check and prayerfully do so to make that decision.
Okay. Thank you so much, ma'am. So we're going to have to speed things up a teeny weeny little bit. Please bear with us. We have a question around the other external factors in our relationship, and it's 2 in 1. The first is, do we have to ask our family members to inform us before they come visit? And the second question says, how can a husband handle the issue of the in-laws staying with the couple, and of course the mother-in-law is trying to interfere, or any other in-law trying to interfere in that relationship? I'm not going to direct it to any person in particular. I don't know which of our panelists would like to take the question. So dealing with in-laws.
Right. My wife and I found it easy to accommodate. She accommodated my siblings. I accommodated her siblings. We accommodated our parents. Not because we were at that time overtly comfortable, but because we had affinity for our family members. It worked out for us. We did not have issues. But I know of people for whom it never worked. Not because they did not want to welcome family members into their home, but because of the overbearing nature of the family members. Now, this is where I believe the husband and the wife should form a united front. You do not allow the peace of your home to be altered by people who can up and go at any time because you want to be good to them. We are in Africa. In Africa, we don't have old people's homes. Our homes are old people's homes. If you are in the US or in the UK, at a certain age, parents are parceled to old people's homes. But in Africa, at least to the best of my knowledge, we try to accommodate people. But in the place of accommodation, should also be spiritual discernment. You do not, for example, open your home, and I'm speaking now from the position of experience, to somebody who you know, for example, does not have the same spiritual belief and understanding that you have. You do not say, because you want to be helpful, expose yourself to such situations. If that is the situation you find yourself in, then I will encourage you to make alternative arrangements. But I know that some people in some families would insist that it was my breast that this man suckled before you married him. I must come to his house. If that is the situation, there must be a consensus at the end between the man and the woman. If there is, between the husband and the wife, if there is no consensus, it is going to be a recipe for disaster. Because like Mr. Akinpelu said, our in-laws, our parents have a way of insinuating ideas into our minds, things that we did not even entertain. And it has a way of having a foothold. So my counsel is, if you can do it and you are spiritually discerning, please go ahead. If not, all they can do is to complain, and after a while, the old people will go home anyway.
Thank you very much, sir. We're wrapping up the conversation now. Like I said earlier, and remember that you can always share your questions, familylife@daystarng.org. You can also walk up to the counseling unit or the family life unit to have counseling sessions, to have conversations. I'd like a word from each of our panelists, and I said a word. As we wrap up this conversation, a lot has been said, but if you were to give us your last thoughts on the issue of mindful communication and how we can help us blossom in our marriages and by extension our relationships, please share that with us as we wrap up. I'll start with you, Mr. Ogu, and then move to Mr. Adeniji.
So I think whatever happens, don't stop communicating. Keep the doors open. Never say never. Always communicate from a place of empathy. Trying to put yourself in the other person's shoes. Because like we've said here, you really do not know where the person is coming from and how the person is processing the information. And when we also communicate, like Sister Joy said, please try to break down information. Because sometimes we just assume that the other person can fill in the gaps. It's like saying, come. When you say come, you assume that the other person knows where he's coming to. So come has, there are a lot of spaces in between come. Come 6 foot forward, come to where I am, come and sit with me, come and stand by me. I mean, there are a lot of variations. So please, as much as possible, let's not allow the other person to just fill in the gaps and then you are complaining that I said come and see what you are doing. It's okay to break down information so that the other person can receive and understand, and always leave the doors open from a place of empathy. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So a round of applause for Mr. Ogwu. Mrs. Akinkwelu, before we take your last words, I'm going to throw a question to you to please answer, and then we'll have your last words on the conversation that we're having this evening. So this person says, my husband screams a lot and I notice it brings out the part of me that I haven't seen before. I've explained this to him. How do I handle it? Is it out of place if I also ask him to let go of his ex's totally severe ties with them?
Those are two different questions.
Yes, ma'am.
One is that the husband screams a lot and she wants to be able to
ask him to let go of his exes, not be in touch with them at all, severe ties with them.
In fact, okay, so the part of screaming, obviously, he must have been like that, I want to believe, before they got married. And if he wasn't, you want to find out why is he screaming. It's either he feels he has to raise his voice because you're not listening. So you want to check why it has changed. If that is not the case, maybe he has always been raising his voice. So that's why some people who have loud voices will tell you, please don't listen to. So those who are now emotionally intelligent understand how they have the tone of their voice or the volume affects the other person. But if you realize that over time, he's raising his voice doesn't mean anything, it's just the way he's used to talking, then look beyond the voice. If you can't get him to change, because it depends on the way you guys are able to relate and resolve issues, but if you can't get him to tone down his voice, then look beyond what it is he's saying, right? To be able to get the information, because possibly that's the way he talks. And maybe with time he will stop. So you want to check if that would help work. Don't focus on that and listen to what it is he's trying to tell you, because you can't change him completely, which is why I said he possibly was like that before you guys got married. And a lot of us get married with mindsets of, I will change or he will change. Hello? The person most likely will not change. Settle that in your mind and know, how do I cope with it? Now, the other question was X, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so I think exes. I don't know what he's looking for with exes. But if the person is listening, I want to hope your husband is listening. Why would you be dealing with your exes? When they say don't play with fire, exactly. Right? It's because fire will burn you. You can't see fire and you are playing with it and you say, don't worry, it won't burn me. You're not a child. You should know that you don't play, with things that are potential flames that could cause issues. So please, and you can also be diplomatic about having that conversation with him. And I wanted to chip in something when he said, before getting married, for those who are not married, make sure your partner has somebody who you can report them to. Let me put it like that. Don't feel like those of you that are wishing your mother-in-law, your father-in-law, and all of them dead. There are people that person should be able to listen to so that you can also take such issues to where if you don't have a counselor. Do you understand? But exes are no, please. You don't want to be keeping relationships such that, because you can only speak for yourself. You can say, I'm done. But you don't know if the person is done. And so you're there playing and thinking, and guys are always the last people to know when a lady is onto them. Is after it has gone far. Permits me, sorry guys, but that's the honest truth. So don't stay there thinking, I'm fine, we're cool, because the person may still be having thoughts. And you're there thinking, we're done. So please, don't play with fire. End it and let's know it's done. And if your husband is not listening, that was why I went to that point, then look for someone who you can maybe have that conversation with to have, help him see reasons why he shouldn't be having such exes.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Yes, sir, Mr. Deniji. Right. 2 questions. Sorry, sir. Yes, sir. 2 questions. And then before we hear your own last thoughts as well. Is love enough to keep a marriage? We know that by the grace of God, you've been at this for a while. Was it just love that has helped you this far, right? Because trials will come, all sorts of things will happen. Is it just love? We love each other and we're okay. Then the second question, this person says, I was confident I heard from God before, but she still hasn't heard from God. And during this rocky period we were having, I met a female friend, and that female friend is marriage material and all that. We communicate better, and everything's better and easier with this new female friend versus the lady I heard from God from that has not given me answer. So,
short answer to the second scenario, he never heard from God. God is yea and amen. He is not in the business of changing his mind. Now, the issue I have, and I do apologize, my generation is way ahead of the current generation. The issue I have with the way we do it in the body of Christ today is to say that I have a leading. A brother will go to a sister, I have been led to you. Led by who? Now, if it was the Holy Spirit that ministered to you, that a sister is the person to get married to, that Holy Spirit who does not work in vacuum will have ministered to the woman, or the moment you mention it to that woman, she herself will have a leading towards where you are headed. It is, as far as I'm concerned, modern trend when a brother will go to a sister Oftentimes, sisters are shy to go to brothers to say that the Lord has shown me that you are my wife. Tell the sister, I like you. Can you be my wife? Rather than bringing the Almighty God. Because if it was the Almighty God, He would not therefore allow your eyes to see this other wife material that is entering your eyes. I just felt I should clear that up. As to the first question, if love is enough, my wife and I got married in 1990. We've had a good life together. But she would back me up when I say this: love is not enough. What is enough is God as the focal point, center of that marriage. The way we were when we got married as youngsters is not the way we both are now, even though she's still a beautiful woman, well beyond her age. But age has happened. So if what entered your eye was the physical beauty, if what entered your eye as a woman is the biceps,
Six packs.
six-pack has now become one pack. So it is not love. And I am trying to be very practical, even though we're in church. What is sufficient for every marriage is the Holy Spirit as the partner of that marriage. I tell people that, as far as I'm concerned, a Christian marriage does not have two people. It has the couple who are now one, according to Genesis, and the Almighty God as the leader of that marriage. So if you have God, then love, even though it might not fade, be reduced, something will keep the marriage going. So my final word, Ma, is that I want to appeal to all our young people to try and trust God in the choice of a partner. We shouldn't look at, these days, I hear a lot when I'm counseling, we shouldn't look at prospects. Oh, that brother has a job in an oil company. In this church, we have counseled somebody who wanted to get married at different times to different sisters in this church. And the question we kept asking, bro, what happened to that sister? Oh no, this one has better prospects. And until we told him that thus far, no more, he tried to keep coming because he was looking for validation for what he was doing. So I want to beg our youth, look beyond the today. Look at tomorrow in the choice of a life partner. Because as far as we are concerned, though, once that union is formed, till death doth part.
Thank you so much, sir. Yes, Mrs. Akinpelu, final statement from me as we wrap up.
Yeah. So I'll just say some words. Trust. It's critical for you to be able to communicate effectively, and trust is built over time. So how are you showing yourself trustworthy? Because if I can't trust you, I won't feel free having conversations with you. So check to build trust. Second is mutual respect. If you don't respect me, you will not learn to communicate to me properly or be interested, genuinely interested in me. So learn, respect, mutual respect for each other, because when you do that, of course, it's easier to communicate. And then the other thing is learn to use kind words, if at all anything. Some of us, let's stop also using our background growing up. Yes, we grew up, but there are things that you need to also learn and unlearn. Use kind words. It would always work because it's like a door opener when you want to have a conversation. because the person knows you're not coming to fight. Do you understand? So learn to use those, the children, they call it magic words, right? The 5 magic words, please, thank you, and whatever it is. Just apply. Those are little tidbits that can help you in communicating effectively. And for those who are still starting in their relationship, consciously build these things. Don't go into marriage and say, it's when I get there, we will build it. You start the journey from now by paying the price of the things that you need to do, and then it becomes you can build better on it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, church, for being a part of our conversation this evening. Please kindly appreciate our panelists, Mr. Adewale Adeniji, Mr. Carl Ogu, and Mrs. Joy Akinpelu. Thank you so very much. Remember that counseling is available. People are here to listen to you, to pray with you, to ensure that by God's grace, we all blossom in our marriages.
Daystar, raising role models.